Hi there. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have 2 million friends but zero face-to-face conversation? That is my life. I am Esther Crawford, an 18-year-old high school senior, and I hide a huge secret. Online, I am aesthetic, a rising fashion creator on TikTok. I can turn trash into high fashion as my latest dress is made entirely of old newspapers. But in real life, I am completely invisible. I suffer from severe social anxiety. It is a constant, suffocating fear of being judged. My bedroom, filled with sewing tools and the crisp smell of ink, was my only sanctuary from the world. My parents love me, but they do not understand. To them, anxiety is just a fate. They did not know that a single knock on my door would shatter my safe world forever. My mom and dad walked in with huge smiles. My dad announced that we were moving because he got a job transfer to San Francisco. Panic hit my chest. My voice shook as I begged my mom to stay. I told her I was a senior and all my friends were here, but she just brushed it off. She told me to get over it and pack, calling it our only chance at a better life. They had no idea that throwing me into a new school full of strangers was my absolute worst nightmare. The first morning at my new school was overwhelming. The building was twice as big as my old one. On the outside, I kept my face completely blank, but on the inside, I was a complete disaster. I was shaking, sweating, and biting my nail. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ear. I felt like 1,000 eyes were watching my every move. I could not risk making eye contact with anyone. Suddenly, the crowded hallway went quiet. A very attractive, stylish couple walked in. I did not know who they were yet, but they clearly owned the place. The boy had this effortless confidence, and the girl walked right beside him with her head held high. Instantly, everyone turned to look at them, whispering and staring. I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. This stunning couple ate up all the attention in the hallway, which meant I was completely safe. I quickly slipped away in the opposite direction before anyone could notice me. After navigating through the maze of unfamiliar hallways, my first morning finally crawled to lunchtime. My feet were sore, and my mind was completely exhausted from running from one confusing class to the next. I held my lunch tray tightly, feeling the cold metal beneath my slippery finger. The cafeteria was a war zone of social groups. The room was packed with rows of long tables, and almost every single seat was taken. I looked around hopelessly, smelling the heavy scent of greasy pizza and French fries. I slowly walked over to a nearby table, but nobody even looked up. I stood there, frozen, not knowing if I should sit down or just walk away. Suddenly, a very pretty girl appeared right in front of me. I was caught off guard and immediately looked at her eyes. They were a striking shade of sky blue. Without thinking, I mumbled those exact words out loud. The girl looked quite confused and asked me what I had said, but she quickly brushed it off and smiled warmly. She asked if I was new to the school. She introduced herself as Jojo, the class president, and invited me to sit with her group. I felt a small spark of gratitude and followed her. She led me to a table where a few other students were sitting. As we got closer, my heart stopped. Sitting at that very table was the gorgeous couple from this morning, along with one or two other students. I now knew the boy was Colin, and the girl beside him was Amanda. Jojo looked at Colin with bright, admiring eyes. She smiled and asked them if they had space for 2 more. Before anyone could answer, she pulled me close to her. Amanda rolled her eyes. She spoke in a highly sarcastic tone, saying that they definitely had room because the more, the merrier. My stomach dropped. It was very obvious that Amanda was not happy about my presence. I felt so out of place. It would be incredibly awkward to turn around and leave now, so I had to stay. Jojo gently pulled me down to sit right at the table. I kept my eyes glued to the floor. My voice was barely a whisper as I introduced myself as Esther. I could feel a hot wave of heat rushing up my neck. My entire face turned as red as a chair. Amanda noticed my bright red face and teased me. She laughed and said she did not know the cafeteria served fresh tomatoes today. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Fortunately, Colin saved me. He gently nudged Amanda with his elbow. He told her to finish her lunch because they still had homework to do. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. I silently thanked him in my head. I kept my head down, staring intensely at my food, trying to disappear. By the next morning, I had memorized the school layout a bit better, so my walk through the hallway was not as terrifying. That was until I saw a girl waving in my direction. She was standing with a small group of friends, and Colin was right there with them. As I walked closer, I realized the girl looked exactly like Jojo, the class president from yesterday. But there was one major problem. Her eyes were not blue. I shrugged to myself. I assumed she was just a twin sister or maybe a doppelganger waving at someone behind me. I kept my face completely blank and walked straight past her without saying a word. Behind me, Jojo's friends burst into loud laughter. One guy teased Jojo, asking her if she really just got ghosted in real life. He joked about her calling herself the class president. The cold realization hit me. That girl has actually been the class president since yesterday. It was so incredibly strange, but my absolute worst nightmare did not happen in the hallway. It happened later that day during biology class. I was standing at the front of the classroom right next to the teacher. She looked at the class and announced that we had to work in pairs. My chest tightened in instant panic. I looked at the crowd of students, begging in my mind for anyone to help me. I just wanted someone to raise their hand. But the classroom remained completely silent. The teacher sighed. She looked at a quiet boy sitting at the very back. She called him Zeke and said he was in desperate need of a partner. She told him to raise his hand so I could see where he was. I saw a lonely arm go up in the back row. I quickly walked over to the empty seat beside. The boy looked at me and introduced himself as Zeke. He asked if my name was Esther, but as he kept speaking, his voice suddenly faded in my ears. I was completely distracted by his eyes. I could not help myself. I mumbled in surprise, saying his eyes were baby blue and emerald green. Zeke instantly looked very angry. He snapped his fingers right in front of my face, making me flinch. He asked me in a sharp voice if his eyes looked funny to me. I felt terrible. I did not want to upset my very first lab part. I awkwardly explained my secret. I told him that I had struggled with eye contact since I was a little kid. To help me, my mom made me play a game. She told me to always look at the exact color of a stranger's eye. This trick made people think I was looking them in the eye. My mom would even test me later by asking for the color. But I admitted to Zeke that the trick never cured my anxiety. It actually made things weirder. I usually only remembered people's eye colors, but I completely forgot their names or what their faces looked like. Zeke listened to me. His angry expression softened, and he looked a bit confused. He told me that I was very weird, but he believed my story. He admitted that he did not like interacting with people either. He explained that people always picked on him because of his unusual eye. I looked at him, feeling a sudden sense of comfort. For the first time in this new school, I felt like someone finally understood how hard it was to just exist around other people. It was no surprise that two social outcasts like us became fast friends. Zeke began tutoring me in biology and chemistry after school, while I sat with him and helped him translate his Spanish homework. Thanks to his company, lunchtime was no longer a daily struggle of searching for a place to sit. We started spending our lunch breaks sitting on a quiet patch of green grass outside, away from the loud cafeteria. We would sit there for hours, eating our lunch and talking about our favorite anime. Zeke was also incredibly supportive of my fashion design hobby, which made me feel comfortable enough to share my biggest secret with him. I told him all about my TikTok account and my 2 million followers. Of course, he still loved to tease me about my anxiety. One sunny afternoon, as we were sitting on our usual grass patch, Zeke pointed towards Colin and Amanda, who were walking close by. He grinned and called me an eye reader, asking me if I knew what color eyes the school powerhouses had. I immediately shook my head and told him there was absolutely no way I would look. I explained that I never look attractive guys in the eye because my face would instantly turn into a bright red tomato. I added that the same rule applied to attractive girls. I did not want them to think I was trying to start a fight with them just by staring. Zeke looked at me with a playful but slightly disappointed expression. He asked me if I was really that avoidant and if I had ever made eye contact with anyone at this school besides him. I proudly answered that I had. I told him I made eye contact with JoJo, the blue-eyed girl. Zeke laughed and told me her eyes were not actually blue but brown. He explained that she loved wearing colored contact lenses. He smiled warmly with a soft look in his eyes as he told me how JoJo changed her eye color, hair, and accessories every single week like a total chameleon. But then his smile faded and he sighed. He muttered that it was a shame she was so in love with a boring guy like Colin Gray. I giggled quietly to myself. It was very obvious to me that Zeke had a huge crush on JoJo. Honestly, I thought Zeke could be a really great catch too, if only he was not so insecure about his different colored eye. Zeke shook off his sad thoughts and asked me if I had heard about JoJo's upcoming Halloween party. I shook my head and asked him what about it. He looked down at the grass, sounding quite disheartened. He said he thought about going, but he did not have a costume. He told me to forget it anyway, because a girl like JoJo would never notice him at a crowded party. I felt a surge of excitement and told him no way. I insisted that he had to go, and I promised him that I would handle his costume. That was how we ended up standing on the front porch of JoJo's house on Halloween night. The cool autumn air was filled with the smell of fallen leaves and the distant sound of loud music. I had successfully transformed my quiet friend into King Lelouch, a famous anime character. Zeke's unique baby blue and emerald green eyes were absolutely perfect for the look. He insisted that I come with him as his personal stylist. I was not even wearing a costume, just my normal clothes. My heart was pounding loudly against my ribs, and my palms were dripping with sweat just thinking about the crowd inside. But I could not abandon my friend, so I swallowed my fear and walked in with him. The moment we stepped inside the crowded living room, a sudden silence fell over the crowd. Everyone stopped talking and stared at Zeke. Then Zeke flipped his long black cape with a dramatic flourish. The entire room suddenly erupted into loud whistles and cheers. I let out a happy giggle as I watched him. Zeke looked absolutely ecstatic. I knew his ego must be through the roof at that moment. I took a slow step backward, quietly sliding into a dark corner to escape the crowd. I looked around shyly, realizing this was what a real high school house party felt. Suddenly, I overheard two girls talking nearby. One girl whispered to her friend that the creator aesthetic must go to our school, or at least Zeke had some kind of connection to her. The second girl agreed, saying she was absolutely sure this was the exact Lelouch costume aesthetic had been designing on her channel. Panic hit me like a truck. My chest tightened and my breath caught in my throat. I pleaded in my mind for them to stop guessing. There could be hundreds of Lelouch costumes during Halloween, and I definitely did not want anyone to find out my secret identity. Just as I was trying to calm my racing heart, a familiar voice spoke from behind. It was Colin. He teased me in a playful voice, asking me what my costume was, and if I was dressed up as a shy, cute girl. My face turned completely red. I stuttered, trying to find my word. I pointed at his outfit and awkwardly told him he had a very nice Stranger Things shirt. Colin smiled warmly and teased me again. He asked if I thought he looked even better than the character Eddie from the show. My heart was beating so fast I could barely think. I mumbled that he definitely did, then quickly added that I had a thing I needed to do and had to leave right away. Without waiting for his response, I turned around and ran straight out of the house into the cool night air. My chest was heaving as I breathed in the fresh breeze. That was definitely way too much socializing for one day. The morning after that wild party, things began to change. I noticed that Zeke started hanging out with JoJo almost every day. He walked differently now, with his head held high, and he seemed much more confident. I was genuinely happy for my friend at first, but very quickly I realized he was no longer the same guy I used to know. One afternoon, we agreed to study together in the school library. I sat there for an hour, smelling the old books and waiting, but he completely stood me up. When I confronted him the next morning in the hallway, he did not even look sorry. He casually told me that he had not touched his homework yet because he was out with JoJo. Then he had the nerve to ask if he could copy my Spanish work. I felt a bit hurt, but I let it go and handed him my notebook. But when he was done copying, I asked him to help me with my chemistry prep. He flat out refused, telling me he was simply too busy to teach me. Things went on like this for a while. He kept using me, and I kept letting him because I was afraid of being lonely again. But today, the shocking truth finally slapped me in the face. I was walking down the hallway when I saw Zeke talking to JoJo. A few other popular kids were standing nearby. JoJo looked quite annoyed, crossing her arm. As I got closer, I heard Zeke speak in a mocking voice. He told JoJo and the others not to worry about me. He said he only kept me around so I could do his Spanish homework for him. He even called me a total buzzkill. My face burned and I completely forgot about my anxiety for a sec. I marched straight over to them. I looked Zeke in the eyes and told him loudly that his free homework trial had officially expired. I asked him if that was what he really thought of our friendship. Zeke looked extremely awkward. He kept glancing at JoJo's face to see her reaction. To impress her, he put on a mean sneer. He called out to the surrounding crowd, telling everyone to look because I had finally realized the truth about myself. He mockingly called it adorable. JoJo laughed loudly. She egged him on, telling him to tell everyone the rest. Zeke turned back to the crowd. He told everyone that I actually had to make my own clothes because I could not buy them. He called my designs pathetic. The other students standing around burst into cruel laughter. I stood there completely aghast. Who was this boy standing in front of me? He was the exact opposite of the gentle, insecure boy I had spent the last few months with. I felt like I had stepped into the upside down. Suddenly, the hallway felt very small. I realized that dozens of people were staring at me. I saw Colin and Amanda watching from a distance, along with Zeke's new friend. My palms began to sweat and my throat went dry. I could not handle the pressure. Our friendship was over. Zeke and I were practically strangers now. I turned around and walked away, heading back to my gloomy and lonely life. To make things even worse, I saw Zeke again later that afternoon on the school paper. He was pictured on the front page, looking incredibly smug. The school journalist had interviewed him about his famous Lelouch costume. But as I read the article, my jaw dropped. In the interview, JoJo claimed that she was actually the creator behind the TikTok channel aesthetic. She claimed she designed the costume, and Zeke backed up her entire lie. JoJo had even shared some of my personal design sketches, the ones I had shared with Zeke in secret. I was absolutely furious. I walked straight to the school baseball field, where JoJo was practicing cheerleading in a corner. The smell of freshly cut grass normally calmed me down, but right now I was shaking with rage. I marched up to her and confronted her about the article, but JoJo did not seem fazed at all. She smirked at me and flipped her long hair. She asked me what she should care if I was the real creator. She told me she could easily be aesthetic too. Then, she grabbed my arm and dragged me right into the middle of the field where the rest of the school was gathered. JoJo raised her voice, calling for everyone's attention. She pointed at me and told the crowd that my name name was Esther. She said they probably did not know me, but that did not matter. She announced that I had something important to share with everyone. Then she gave me a hard push forward. Suddenly, hundreds of eyes turned to look at me. The field went dead silent. My mind went blank. I did not know where to look. This was so different from talking to my camera in my quiet bedroom. My entire body went into crisis mode. My chest squeezed tight and my vision began to blur. I felt a wave of intense nausea hit my stomach. My face turned a pale green, and I had to cover my mouth with both hands because I felt like I was going to throw up. I could not take it. I turned around and ran away as fast as my legs could carry me, leaving their laughter behind. After running away from the baseball field, I ended up in the school hallway. I stood at my locker, hiding my face inside the metal door so nobody could see my teary eyes. Even though I had managed to calm my breathing down, I knew I could not face anyone right now. It felt like the absolute worst day of my life. Suddenly, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned around slowly. It was Amanda. I was so confused. What did this popular social butterfly want with me? She looked at me with a concerned expression and asked if I was okay. I did not make eye contact with her. I brushed her off, telling her that I was definitely not okay. I asked her why girls like her and JoJo, who already had everything in the world, always wanted to take away everything from someone like me. Amanda looked quite frustrated. She told me she was just trying to be nice. Then she rolled her eyes and muttered that she would not even be here if it were not for her silly little friend. I looked at her confused. I asked her what she was talking about. Amanda's face softened and she calmed down. She told me to never mind her previous words. She said she was sorry but added that I really did not look okay. She told me to come with her, saying she knew exactly how to make me feel better. She smiled and joked that skipping one class would not kill me, but having bad mental health definitely would. I wiped away my tears. I decided to trust her and went with her, even though we barely knew each other. She was right about one thing. The last thing I needed right now was to sit in a stuffy classroom. We walked to the city center and stopped in front of a vintage bookstore. Amanda pointed at the door and told me to go inside, promising me there was someone in there who could help me. Before I could ask any questions, she turned around and left. It was very strange, but I walked inside anyway. The moment I opened the door, it felt like a warm hug. The air was filled with the comforting, rich smells of old wood and dusty paper. It immediately felt healing. I began browsing through the shelves, feeling a bit more at peace. Suddenly, I saw Colin walking towards me. I panicked. My heart did a wild flip. To avoid him, I quickly stuck my face into an empty slot on a nearby bookshelf, pretending to be very busy. But that was a terrible mistake. The shelf was filled with thick dust. I pulled my head out and began coughing uncontrollably. A cloud of gray dust flew into the air, completely covering my face. Instead of laughing, Colin only smiled. He stepped closer and gently wiped the dust off my cheeks with his hand. I felt incredibly awkward. I stuttered, telling him that if he was looking for his girlfriend, Amanda had just left. Colin chuckled. He told me that Amanda was not his girlfriend. Then he explained that he actually asked Amanda to bring me here. I was completely surprised. My voice shook as I asked him why he did that. Colin smiled and handed me a book. He told me to just calm down and said he bought me a gift. I looked at the cover. It was my absolute favorite genre. I looked up at him in surprise, asking him how he even knew what I liked to read. Colin looked at me gently. He explained that he had seen me reading that specific genre to calm myself down before. It turned out that Colin had been observing me from a distance for a long time. He remembered my reading habits, but he had been too hesitant to talk to me. He was afraid that his popularity would attract too much unwanted attention to me and make my anxiety worse. My mind suddenly went back to the past few weeks. I remembered a few times when I felt someone watching me. I recalled seeing Colin standing far away in the hallway, looking at me with a quiet smile before quickly turning away when I noticed him. Colin looked at me a bit apologetic. He said that since everyone now knew he liked me, he was sorry for causing more drama. I felt my cheeks go warm, but this time it was not from panic. I told him not to be sorry. I said it was my own fault and my anxiety's fault. Colin took a step closer. He told me he could help me with that. Then, he looked into my eyes and asked me if I would go to prom with him. I was completely taken aback. I asked him how going to prom would help my social anxiety. Colin smiled warmly. He told me to trust him, promising me that it would help. As he spoke, our faces got very close. I looked at his eyes. They were a beautiful, calm shade of gray. It was in that exact moment that I realized something amazing. I had been talking to him all this time without panic, and I had not even used my mother's old eye color trick. I was just looking at him. I began to think that maybe this guy really could help me find my courage. I slowly nodded my head, agreeing to go with him. When prom night finally arrived, Colin picked me up and drove us to the school campus. He went to park his car while I waited near the entrance of the decorated venue. The night air was cool, and I could hear the muffled bass of the music inside. Suddenly, Zeke appeared out of the shadows. He looked very rushed and anxious. He ran up to me and told me that there was not much time and that I had to listen to you. He warned me that Jojo was planning to give me an award tonight, but he explained that it was a trap to get me to stand on a specific X mark on the stage. He said there was a trap door underneath, and Jojo wanted to humiliate me in front of the entire school because I was dating the guy she liked. I looked at him, feeling cold and suspicious. I asked him what kind of sick game he was trying to play, and why he was telling me this after everything he did. Zeke looked truly desperate. He told me he wanted to make things right. He admitted that Jojo had taken advantage of his feelings, and he had been too blind to see that she only loved Colin. He said she had been using him to hurt me all along. He begged me to believe him, saying this was his only chance to make it up to me. He pleaded with me not to go up on that stage. I shook my head, feeling the sting of his past betrayal. I told him to stop it. I said I would not let him make a fool of me ever again. Right at that moment, Colin walked up. He immediately stepped between us, shielding me from Zeke. He told Zeke angrily to stay away from me, asking him if he had not done enough damage already. Then Colin took my hand and led me away toward the entrance. Behind us, Zeke called out in a sad, broken voice, saying he was truly sorry. We walked inside the school auditorium. The room was beautifully decorated with fairy lights, but the sheer noise of the crowd made my stomach twist in panic. Amanda met us at the entrance and playfully joked that she was finally free from being called Colin's rumored girlfriend. She looked at me and smiled, saying Jojo must be green with envy seeing how cute we looked together. I looked around the packed room, and my chest immediately tightened. I could not do this. Without thinking, I crawled under a nearby dessert table and curled up into a tight ball. Colin did not hesitate. He knelt down and poked his head under the tablecloth. He told me that I looked absolutely stunning and that my dress was amazing. He gently asked me to come out so everyone could see me. I shook my head, whispering that they would only laugh in my face. Colin smiled. He crawled completely under the table and sat down beside me, letting the tablecloth fall back down. He grabbed my hand and said that since tonight was a special night, we could enjoy it in our own unusual way. Then he gently kissed the back of my hand. I felt my heart melt. I could not believe someone would go so far out of his way just to make me feel safe. We sat there chatting quietly until the lights outside dimmed for the slow dance. I smiled at Colin and told him it was time. We stepped out, and hand in hand we began to slow dance. Feeling his touch, the crowd seemed to disappear, and I felt completely at peace. But the magic stopped when the music ended. Jojo stepped up to the microphone to present the award. She smiled fakely and announced that the award for Best Dressed of the Night went to Esther Crawford. My heart froze. I looked across the room and saw Zeke shaking his head with a worried face. He was telling the truth. It was indeed a trap. Colin whispered that I did not have to go up there if I did not want to. But as I saw Jojo's smug face, a sudden spark of courage rose inside. I was tired of running. I stepped onto the stage, carefully walking around the specific X mark Zeke had warned me about. I took the microphone and thanked everyone. Then I announced that our hard-working class president, Jojo, deserved this award much more than me. Jojo's smile turned stiff. She insisted the award was mine and told me to take one step forward. I took a step in a different direction, asking if she meant there. Jojo lost her patience. She rushed toward me to push me, but I quickly stepped back. Her foot landed right on the X mark, the trap door snapped open, and she fell straight into the dark pit underneath. I calmly stepped down from the stage while everyone else rushed to help her. I could not help but giggle. That was definitely going to be the front page story tomorrow. A few days later, I was back in my bedroom. My phone was on a tripod, and Colin was standing behind it as my director. I took a deep breath, looked directly at the lens, and did a quick spin to show off my prom dress. I smiled gleefully, telling my followers that if they were wondering who this strange girl was, my name was Esther, the person behind the aesthetic channel. I told them to settle in because today I was finally doing a face reveal and sharing my story. This crazy journey taught me a deep lesson about my own worth and the walls I had built around myself. I spent so many years hiding behind a digital screen, thinking that 2 million online followers could fill the void of my loneliness. And I even let people like Zeke walk over me just to feel accepted. But I finally realized that true courage is not about being fearless or miraculously curing my social anxiety overnight. It is about finding the strength to stand up for yourself and speak your truth, even when your hands are shaking and your heart is pounding. And most importantly, I learned that those who truly care about you will never force you to change or push you into a crowded spot. Instead, the right people will always meet you exactly where you are comfortable.